It comes with 27 games, but that's just for starters. You can get 9 cartridges, 187 games. Blackjack!
Happy 50th birthday, Atari! Hi, I'm Nick Cassiano, and tonight on Gaming Delight, we're going to look back at how Atari and its first commercially successful arcade game, Pong, came to be. So, without any further ado, let's get started. The year was 1972. The first Popeyes restaurant opened in Louisiana. 3 popular game shows debuted on CBS: The Price is Right, The Joker's Wild, and Gambit. Only one is still around today. The infamous Watergate scandal began. Several popular films hit theaters, including Snoopy Come Home and The Godfather. HBO made its debut in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Magnavox released the first video game console, the Odyssey. Meanwhile, the newly established Atari gave birth to their popular table tennis-like arcade game, Pong. People loved the game. Many still do today, in fact. A few years later, it was released in home console form. Several other companies made clones of them, including Coleco and Nintendo. But how did Atari come to be? And what gave them the idea to create Pong? This year, Atari turns 50 years old. In honor of the 50th anniversary, Gaming Delight presents Atari and Pong. Our story begins in Farmington, Utah in the 1960s. At the privately owned Lagoon Amusement Park, there worked a man who was made manager of the games department by the name of Nolan Bushnell. In 1962, Bushnell got enrolled at the University of Utah. He had been fascinated with computers, learned programming, and made his own primitive games on the university's mainframes. Upon seeing many computer science students playing the space combat game Space War, Bushnell was enamored. He even took time to create some games of his own, including Tic-Tac-Toe, 3D Tic-Tac-Toe, and Fox and Geese. Despite him and fellow university students writing 7 games, his all-time favorite game at the lab was Space War. In 1963, Bushnell got the job at the Lagoon Amusement Park. He would work full-time during the summer and part-time during the school year. While working at the park, Bushnell would watch customers play electromechanical games such as Speedway and help to maintain their machinery as he learned how they operated. He eventually came to grips with the industry in general. In 1968, he graduated from the University of Utah with an electrical engineering degree. After graduation, Bushnell moved to the state of California in hopes of joining the Walt Disney Company. However, Disney wasn't interested in hiring him, so he joined the electronics firm Ampex, where he worked as an electrical engineer. There, he discovered the Data General Nova, a $4,000 microcomputer, and Space War popped into his head. I thought if I could get that computer to run 4 monitors and have 4 coin slots, it would make enough money to pay for itself, he said. At Ampex, Bushnell met Ted Dabney, an electronics engineer who had taken electronics courses while serving 3 years at the Marine Corps. In 1961, after leaving the Marines, Dabney worked at Bank of America, then at Hewlett-Packard, before ultimately landing the job at Ampex. Late in 1969, Bushnell and Dabney, alongside computer programmer Larry Bryan, formed a partnership known as Syzygy Engineering. The name Syzygy came from the astronomical term for an alignment of at least 3 celestial bodies. Bushnell and Dabney began to design Bushnell's coin-operated Space War concept, but the Nova was so slow it couldn't update the monitor fast enough for the game to progress at the right speed. So Bushnell decided to abandon this project. Then came another idea. Replace the computer with custom-designed hardware. Piece by piece, Bushnell and Dabney created dedicated circuits and programmed them each to perform a different function. This not only mitigated the problem with the Nova, but also proved to be much cheaper to build. No longer would it need multiple monitors. However, this new approach forced the team to make compromises to the game, get rid of Space War's two-player dueling and gravitational field. Instead, players controlled a single ship to shoot down hardware-controlled flying saucers. Long story short, the game was no longer Space War. By early 1971, as the game neared completion, Bushnell wondered to whom the game could be sold. His answer began with a dentist appointment. When Bushnell told his dentist of the game and that he was looking for someone to sell it to, his dentist gave him the number of one of his other patients, Dave Ralston, a sales manager for arcade game manufacturer Nutting Associates, a company in Mountain View, California, founded by Bill Nutting in 1966. Bushnell contacted Ralston, told him about his plans, and they agreed to a deal. Nutting Associates was in need of a new hit game after their success with Computer Quiz, and they figured that Bushnell and Dabney's compromised Space War would be the answer. With that, Bushnell left Ampex and joined Nutting Associates, with Ted Dabney joining soon after. By the summer of 1971, Bushnell and Dabney completed the prototype of their game. What they needed next was a place to test it. Bill Nutting recommended testing it out in a bar in Menlo Park, the Dutch Goose. However, the duo needed a new name for it. One name considered was Cosmic Combat, but it didn't stick. Then someone at Nutting Associates suggested the game be named Computer Space. With that, Bushnell and Dabney took their prototype to the bar, where the game caught a good deal of attention. But other locations on the route were a contrast. Problems with the game included, but were not limited to, the controls, consisting of 4 buttons and an aluminum joystick that could be twisted to control the ship. After the tests at the pizza parlor, the joystick was scrapped within a few hours. Nevertheless, the testing went well enough for Nutting Associates to market the game. In October of 1971, Computer Space was presented at the Music Operators of America Expo in Chicago, Illinois. A month later, it was presented at the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions show. By the end of the year, Computer Space was officially released in arcades as the very first commercially available video game. Nutting handled manufacturing and marketing, and the Syzygy team was paid 5% in royalties for each unit sold. However, Nutting had a problem. While manufacturing was already a difficult task to begin with, marketing the game was even tougher. Dave Ralston decided to give away 1 unit to each of 5 major distributors. Eventually, around 1,000 units were sold. Computer Space wound up grossing around $3 million, and, as agreed, Syzygy was paid 5% in royalties, or around $150,000. But sales were below what Nutting Associates had expected. In 1972, Nolan Bushnell turned to Bill Nutting, requesting an ownership stake in the company. Nutting refused. And so Bushnell and Ted Dabney resigned from the company. The Syzygy duo then set up their own offices and turned to pinball game manufacturer Bally Manufacturing for assistance on their next project. Bally offered them $4,000 a month for 6 months to come up with a new video game and a new pinball machine. Using the funds, the duo hired a former Ampex employee as their first design engineer, Alan Alcorn. Said Bushnell, "I want to make a game that any drunk in any bar can play. Simple enough for a drunk to play." Before he joined the company, Alcorn had no experience with video games. "I'd never seen a video game other than Nolan had showed me his prototype of the Computer Space game," he recalled. At first, Bushnell considered a driving game, inspired by the Speedway game at his amusement park arcade. But he had concerns that it would be too complex for Alcorn's first game. On May 24, 1972, Bushnell witnessed a demonstration of a tennis game on the very first video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey. He tried the system out himself, and although he wasn't a fan of its low quality, he asked Alcorn to design and build a coin-op version of the game. To build the prototype, Alcorn bought a Hitachi black and white television set and hardwired components together inside a 4-foot wooden cabinet. After attaching a coin box from an old pinball machine, Alcorn's prototype was ready. It was given the name Pong, after the sport ping pong. A month later, in preparation for their new game, Bushnell and Dabney each invested $250 in Syzygy so as to incorporate their firm, only to find that the name Syzygy was already taken by a roofing contractor in California. For inspiration, Bushnell turned to a Japanese game he loved playing, Go. He gave the firm a new name after the Go equivalent of the concept of check in chess, Atari. So it was agreed that on June 27, 1972, Syzygy Engineering became Atari Incorporated. In August of 1972, Bushnell and Alcorn brought the new Pong cabinet to Andy Capp's Tavern in Sunnyvale, California, a bar known for its billiards tables, pinball machines, and electromechanical arcade games. Bushnell figured that if Pong could succeed in Andy Capp's, it could do the same just about anywhere. Pretty soon, bar denizens lined up to play, and the game became a huge success. Legend has it that two men showed up one morning at the tavern just to play Pong. Some say it was engineers from rival companies hoping to replicate Pong's design. After a few weeks of success, Alcorn found the Pong cabinet's coin mechanism filled to the brim with quarters. It was time to design a cabinet that could accommodate even more quarters. Meanwhile, Bushnell secured a $50,000 loan with Wells Fargo to manufacture more Pong cabinets. And on November 29, 1972, Atari officially announced Pong. Atari opened its own factory in an abandoned roller skating rink in Santa Clara, California. With a minimal workforce, Atari could only manage to manufacture 10 Pong cabinets a day and was having difficulty with quality control. But within months, manufacturing increased at least tenfold, with production costs kept at around $300. Bushnell went all around the Golden State to pitch Pong to local arcades who couldn't buy enough cabinets. Despite costing around $1,200 per unit, the game was taking in around $200 in quarters per week. That got arcade operators to relent and buy Pong cabinets. Pong soon became a nationwide success, and with that came good fortune for Atari. It also turned video games into a new pastime. This success led them to come out with sequels, including Pong Doubles and Super Pong. In hopes of cashing in on the Pong craze, other companies made their own versions of the game, including Nutting Associates. The latter company released Computer Space Ball just after Pong. There were even clones of Pong released outside of North America, including Taito's Ele-Pong, one of the first video arcade games to hit Japan. Although Atari was successful with Pong, it wasn't all roses. In June of 1973, Nolan Bushnell dismissed Ted Dabney from Atari. He offered $250,000 for Dabney's share at the company, to which he agreed. In April of 1974, Magnavox filed a lawsuit against Atari for patent infringement. They claimed that Pong's technology was too similar to that of the Magnavox Odyssey's table tennis game. Atari lawyers knew that all the litigation from Magnavox could jeopardize the company's finances. On June 6, 1976, Atari settled the case for $1.5 million and gave Magnavox access to Atari's technology for a full year. Other issues included Atari's decision to go global. Their Japanese division initially struggled to distribute their games. Plus, Grand Track 10, the first driving video game, though successful, was underpriced and sold at a loss. But those hardships didn't stop Atari. By 1974, Atari had produced over 8,000 Pong cabinets, despite not keeping up with demand. Following the game's success, the company began development of a version of Pong for people to play at home. In late 1973, Atari hired a new production engineer. The man's name was Harold Lee. Prior to landing the job at Atari, Lee had worked for Standard Microsystems, a company that specialized in calculator chips. He designed 12 chips for the company. Several of them entered production. During his tenure at Atari, Lee suggested that a home version of Pong be made. By 1974, Atari set to work on their home Pong concept, codenamed Darlene after an Atari employee. With the help of Alan Alcorn and Bob Brown, Lee created the prototype. It was a wood pedestal that had over 100 wires inside. These wires were eventually replaced by a single chip designed by Lee and Alcorn. By the second half of the year, the prototype was complete. In February of 1975, at the American Toy Fair in New York City, Nolan Bushnell, alongside Atari's Vice President of Sales Gene Lipkin, unveiled Home Pong to the public. Their price? $99.99. But they didn't receive a single order. Said Bushnell, "One of the most successful consumer products of the time, and we sold none. Innovation is hard." After returning to California, Atari browsed through a catalog for the department store chain Sears Roebuck and found the Magnavox Odyssey advertised in the sporting goods section. In a last resort to gain retailer support, Atari pitched Home Pong to Sears representative Tom Quinn, who discussed terms with the company 2 days later. Atari took their prototype to the Sears Tower in Chicago and connected it to a television set in front of a big crowd of executives. Alcorn powered it on, but all the TV showed was static. Why? Because the transmitter atop the Sears Tower was sending frequencies on the same channel as the Home Pong prototype. Alcorn switched the channel output, and it worked. With that in mind, Sears and Atari reached a compromise. Sears would sell Home Pong exclusively during the 1975 holiday season and rebrand it as Sears Tele-Games. In exchange, Sears would finance Atari's factory and would also provide expertise in quality control and manufacturing, allowing the company to produce 75,000 units by November of 1975. Once Sears Tele-Games was released, it became a huge success. During the holiday season, Sears had sold over 150,000 Tele-Games units, making it the store chain's most successful product. By early 1976, Atari released their own version of Home Pong, and numerous sequels came along afterwards. Thanks to the collaboration between a struggling video game company and a major retailer, the concept of home video game consoles had fully reinvigorated. Let's dive into the hardware. This is a Super Pong unit from 1976. Here's the on-off switch, the button to start the game, dials to control the paddles, and a speaker for the sound effects. That's right, instead of the TV, sound effects come directly from the console. On the back you have a hardwired RF cord, the AC adapter input, which may not be necessary because on the bottom is a compartment for 4 D batteries. Super Pong units also have the switch to choose your game mode. In Game Mode 1, instead of trying to bat the ball past your opponent's paddle, you have to try and get the ball through the small gap on your side to score. I don't really care much for this one. It makes the game go longer. Not to mention, the gap on each paddle is ridiculously narrow. Game Mode 2 is similar to the original Pong, but with a standard Pong paddle on the left side, trying to bat the ball into the gap in the paddle on the right side. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this one. Game Mode 3 is Super Pong, with each player controlling 2 paddles. Now this is my kind of game for this console. Finally, Game Mode 4 is the standard Pong. Pretty straightforward. I prefer this one the best. Today, finding a home Pong console is easier said than done. They usually go for up to $100 depending on condition. Sears did come out with Tele-Games Super Pong 4, but instead of having 2 built-in dials, it came with 4 detachable paddle controllers. Pretty cool. Atari would continue with the arcade business throughout the years. Many other popular games would soon hit the market, including Quack, Grand Track 10, and Breakout. But pretty soon, clones of home Pong would come out, including Coleco's Telstar and Nintendo's Color TV game systems. In addition, the concept of a game console would enter new territory. In 1976, the Fairchild Channel F was released. It stood out from all the dedicated home consoles, being the first video game system to use interchangeable cartridges. However, Atari already had their own cartridge-based console in the works, one that would truly take the industry by storm. But that's all a story for another time. Thanks again for watching Gaming Delight. Until next time, happy gaming!